that works. Okay. All right, Stephanie's still not back. All right, well, Dean, we'll just look at this because actually Stephanie only has one association. So if you are curious about any projects you're working on and how much money they have, you can go. So we have financials. All of the financials are stored here, probably since I started here. The current month we always keep out. So this is the July bank statements. Can you see my OneDrive?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is all the financials that have been completed. So it does include all the bank statements within the financial. And then if you wanted to look back and kind of see how they were last year, you can go to the financial folder, and I have all of the years here. And then all the current months are here, so you can always look at any month you wanted for any association here. They're all stored there.
Okay.
The other thing, let's see, nothing else really here. If you wanted to look at collection reports, I don't know if you would ever need that, but it is available. We do keep all the collection reports here in the same format of each association and the monthly collection report.
Okay.
All right. All the check requests as well. Danielle keeps any check requests she ever receives. And then what I'll do is I'll go back. Stephanie, do we have you back here?
You do. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm the only one in this office ever. So.
I get it. No problem. So also under the OneDrive, we do have a bank folder, and this bank folder actually has all of the signature cards that are blank. So if you ever needed to update a signature card for your association, you can go to AAB, so that's for Alliance Association Bank signature cards, and they're all here filled out for you. So this is just the blank signature card. So if you're going into an annual meeting, or if you have a board member change, you can just go in here to get your updated signature card. And then, of course, if you needed your strong room signature card, it's here as well. Because, of course, if you're going to do the bank signature card, you should also do the strong room at the same time.
Okay, and I just need to send that because I actually just had an annual meeting and have a new board member as of Tuesday night. So I just send them the signature card. How do you want me to do that exactly?
Yeah, so you will certainly send them the signature card. They do, and I always have to remind people, there's one little area that everybody forgets about on these signature cards, and that is the taxpayer certification line. This line here has to be signed, president or treasurer, signature, printed name, date of adoption, so whenever they're signing. And then just simply over here, the signature, their name, and their physical address. They absolutely must include an address. They don't need to include a security word, phone number, email. That's totally optional, but a lot of board members have decided to put that there. So yeah, you just grab this from the OneDrive under the bank folder, and then have them fill that out. And we need a minimum of 2 signatures. If you're not able to get a third signature, maybe somebody's on vacation, just keep your original. I don't need your original at any time. Everything can be sent via email. Keep that original signature card, and when you do catch up with that board member that you're missing, then you can just add to that signature card and then send that over to me.
Okay.
Usually
so the new signature card, I need to have everybody sign that one, basically.
Yeah, unfortunately, we cannot add, so we can't use the existing signature card unless you have the previous one. So a lot of managers, that's what they're doing now, is you can actually eliminate. So if you only had 4 board members on your previous signature card, and say one of them was, resigning, and so you were able to scratch this one out and just add your new board member to the very bottom, you can certainly do that. I always think it's best to just start clean and have a whole new signature card, but you can certainly add if you have just 2 signatures cards or 2 signatures on an existing card, keep that card, and then go ahead and add to it if you have a new board member.
Okay.
So yeah, you'll definitely need to do that. You'll definitely need to do the strong room signature card as well. Usually we recommend the treasurer and, Tammy wants to join now. Yes. All right. Usually the treasurer and president or whoever, it really doesn't matter, but I always recommend it be the first 2 signatures on your signature card. And here you would just put their 2 names that are signing, and then they both sign within this box. So if you just want to do one signature here, one signature there, that's all that we need. And you can send both of those over to me. I forward this to Bill after I processed it with Alliance Bank, and then he sets that up with Strong Room.
Okay, and then I really don't need to have that strong room signature card, a new one, if the person that joined is just they decided to make her secretary. You don't need that then.
Yeah, as long as there are on the current signature card those two signatures that were previously there, yes.
Cool.
You don't need
Cool.
to update that.
Perfect.
And I think you have a Morgan Stanley account, or no, maybe it's Wells Fargo. We'll talk about that later.
Okay, okay,
because
perfect.
you do have outside banks, which we try not to do, but you guys have a lot of money, so certainly. Okay, Tammy's joining us. Here we go. All right. Hi, Tammy. Looks like she's here. All right, so we will just move into the financials. So I'm going to pick a financial that is fairly basic. Let me move this over to my screen.
You mean like
All right.
Marina Bay?
Definitely, we're not going to go over Marina Bay. I'm actually going to need to spend like probably a good hour with you, Tammy, and I'm not sure if I can do that today. I'm scrambling to get done with everything so I can go on vacation.
Yay!
We'll see how we go.
Okay.
All right. Do I need to share my screen again, or can you see the Point Richmond financial here?
Share it again, please.
Share it again. New share. Financials. Share. Got it?
Got it. For some
Okay.
reason, there's a, oh, you got it. Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. Tammy, are you there?
I
can
am.
see
I
you.
am.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. Tammy, I'll go over a few of the things with you, maybe if you have time just after we're done. It was just a few little things, but we're going to jump into a financial report here.
Okay.
So we can go through this fairly simple financial.
That's pretty
and I'm
simple
sorry if
financials. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm going back to the basics. This may be super basic, but that's where I like to start.
I love it. Great.
Okay, good. All right, so this is a balance sheet. I call this the summary of the association. Technically, is a balance sheet. A balance sheet will always have your assets here at the top. So your first asset is going to be your operating cash. Here is with Alliance Bank, $22,526 in the bank. You then have your non-cash assets here, which is your accounts receivable. And you have a bad debt allowance, and this is always a big question of what in the heck is that? This is a number that the CPA designates at the end of the year. So although our accounts receivable looks really low right now, at the end of December 2019, it probably was double this number, because they'll look and see, are there anybody in collections? What's the collectability of those collections? And should they allow for some sort of an allowance that may not be collected? So even though this is now, it's always a negative number because it's saying, you know what, you may not collect that money. It's now looking good. They only have $1,600 due to the association. So this is really just an adjustment. And at the end of the year, if we're still, in the good position that we are now, they'll probably eliminate that and just say, hey, your receivables are looking good. You no longer have a bad debt allowance. Of course, in the days of foreclosures, these numbers were huge. So this is actually not so bad.
Will that change in the, sorry to interrupt you, but will that change for the following year if this does stay the course? For next year's bad debt allowance, will they lower that bad debt allowance or eliminate it?
They'll probably eliminate it altogether. So yeah, they'll look at the end of the year. They'll see what's going on with the 12/31, or in your case, a different year end. They'll see what the end of the year receivables look like, and they will adjust that accordingly. Okay. Certainly, if the receivables are much healthier, then they're going to eliminate it. For this particular association, we don't need that at all. But at the end of 2019, it wasn't in such a good position. But this does stay there the whole year. We don't touch that number because it is a CPA adjustment. So we just leave that there for them to take care of the following year.
Right. Levy just puts that in there and says, this is what I think is going to happen. Got it. Perfect.
And Thanks. They write it off against the bad debt if there is bad debt.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So your next asset is your reserve cash. So your reserve with Alliance Bank or whatever bank you have. Sometimes there's investments down here for CDs or ICS account. ICS account is basically like a CD, but it's actually cash that's available at any time that's just placed with another bank. So we try to keep all the balances below $250,000 with a combined balance. So if you had operating and reserves that combined add more than $250,000, we will open automatically an ICS account, although I encourage every manager to always look at these balances and come up with an investment plan. This association doesn't have a whole lot of reserve cash because you'll see down here that they have done some projects. But I always encourage CDs versus ICS because the interest rate's better, even though interest rates are terrible right now. It's still good to have some sort of investment plan. And if you're in the case of Marina Bay where you have tons of money, then I would say manager, don't even try and consider coming up with a plan. Let an investor or a financial advisor take this over for you, where they're going to look at your reserve study, they're going to look at your cash, work with them and let them do their job, because that's what they get paid the big bucks to do.
Yep.
So that's your reserve cash. And generally, this reserve cash here should match this balance here. So this is your total reserve fund. We'll get down there in a minute, but this should always match that unless you have some sort of a payable or some sort of a liability that's on the reserve side here. So your liabilities here, this would include a prepaid accounts receivable. What is that? That's a homeowner that's decided to prepay their assessments. Why do they prepay their assessments? Who knows? I get this question all the time. I guess they just have excess money. They may not even know that they have prepaid their assessments. Sometimes people just like to be 1 month ahead. Some people pay 6 months ahead. It's always a mystery, but we do have a list of who actually does have prepayments. And in fact, it is a liability because if, God forbid, something were to happen to the association and the association, didn't exist the following month, we technically owe that money to the homeowner because that is not earned income. So that's why it sits as a liability. This next line item is accounts payable. This is who do we owe at the end of the month. So what vendor do we get the invoice at the end of the month, but because, who knows, the board's sitting on approval, it just didn't make it through at the end of the month, invoice came right at the end of the month, we didn't pay it to the following month, so we actually owe that vendor at the end of the month. So we recognize that expense, we list that as a payable, and we will go through to see what the details of this is behind the balance sheet. So everything behind the balance sheet actually is supportive of what's here on your balance sheet. The next category, again, is our reserve fund activity. And what this is it's kind of like having the reserve income and expense report on the balance sheet, which is kind of different. We should also have a reserve income and expense report, which some associations do because we're transitioning some of the newer associations to actually have a separate income and expense report for the reserves. But the older associations, we haven't quite transitioned. We'll get there later. But for this, you'll see the positive numbers. You can consider this income. So the first line item is your replacement fund. So the way that I like to describe this is it's the history of the association. Every year, anything that's below this number, so these transactions here, which is the current year activity, will get closed into this number. So this is the history of the association. This is why the association has the cash in the bank that they do. So in this particular year, they have added $22,000 in reserve contributions. So that's the money that gets transferred each month. They have added the reserve interest that they've earned so far of $113. But then they've also had expenditures. So they've had $14,000 in reserve expenses. So some of these aren't broken down, and certainly I do want to mention if you do have an association that you want to break down the expenses, we have kind of a capture all category that we call reserve expenses or reserve expenditures, which a lot of people just put everything there because they don't have a whole lot of activity. Others choose to have kind of custom categories according to their roof, dry rot, retaining wall, whatever category you want. Reach out to Danielle. She'll create a new category for you so that you can keep track of those, so it's easier to do your reserve study at the end of the year. But this just shows you kind of the current year reserve expenses that the association has had. So these numbers here, basically, they total down to the 57,555.88. So at the end of the year, after we've had all of our activity for the year, basically this number here will become this number, because all of these transactions will go away at the beginning of the year and get closed into here. So you can see that every year that the association has existed, these types of transactions will get closed into here and kind of build that balance. And that balance, again, this number here is equal to this number. So that's the reserve cash. So this has been built over all of the years that the association has existed, pluses and minuses each year. So this always gets closed into the replacement fund. Same goes for the operating fund. So operating fund, what is that? It's the same thing. It's the history of the reserve fund, the history of the operating fund. So in this case, they are over budget by $44,6558, and I'll show you why once we flip to the next page. But in the history of the association, they've had some probably positives, some maybe negative, but ultimately they have ended for the history of the association in a positive note. So they have operating fund of $22,000, and certainly if this was the end of the year, we would be closing this number into this number, and they would be at $18,266. So this is the history of the operating fund and then the current net income. So what is the net income? We go over to our income and expense comparative statements. So that number that we just looked at the bottom, here's your 4465 number that we just saw back here on your balance sheet. So things to always look at. So you're going to look at the top of the report, and that's going to show you the revenues. So your assessment income, your late fees, other revenue, all of those things are here. So this here is the current month of activity. This here is the year to date. Some people like to see the yearly budgets just to see kind of what it looked like for the prior year, what your total budget was. I'm not a fan of this column, but it is what it is. So let's focus here, which is your current month and your current year to date. So as far as income goes, you should pretty much be on budget. Of course, plus or minus if you have odd assessments with, you know, pennies and cents, you might not be exactly on budget, but you should pretty much have a variance of 0. In this case, they have no late fees. They actually had a credit of providing a late fee credit to an owner because their receivables are extremely low. They have operating interest they've earned so far, and apparently they have some sort of a remote system that they've collected income on. And then we get into the expenses. The expenses are kind of broken down by category, and it's important to kind of look at the bottom line of each of the categories and then see why are we over budget. Clearly, there's some sort of minor repairs that they're over budget by about $4,000. They're under budget on their landscape extras. They're a little over budget on their landscape contract. They didn't budget accordingly, so their contract $685, but they only budgeted $660. Something to pay attention to for next year. And again, the utilities, unfortunately, utilities, we do not accrue for utilities. It's kind of hard to estimate what they would be. Some associations do want to accrue, which we can do. And when we do accrue, we just accrue based on the monthly budget. And what that means is that for the water account, in most cases, East Bay Mud, they charge every 60 days. So this month we didn't have an expense, next month we will. We're currently under budget, but you know, being that it's irrigation time, next month we're probably going to get a gigantic bill, and that will put us over budget, and then hopefully we'll even out at the end of the year when irrigation is shut off. These are important numbers to look for, especially when you're budgeting for the next year, of course. Then we get down to administration, and of course what Paul would say is, first things first, let's look at the management contract and make sure we are getting paid. This is how you know that we are actually getting paid what you have budgeted. It's really important to make sure that you're on track of, you know, this has a budget of management additional services that they haven't used, but no, none. So what can we do as an extra project? Those types of things are really important to look at to see where we can do some sort of extra project, or if we would just not have any extra projects and fold it into the next year, that's a possibility as well. But these are all the management administration expenses, insurance. So it looks like they're looking good for on target for end of the year as far as being below budget on their administration budget. And then down below here is your reserve transfer. So that should always be right on track. Certainly if for some reason they had low cash, we're still going to book that expense, but we're going to set it up as a due to, due from, kind of like it's a loan. They didn't fund the reserves accordingly, but to be sure that we keep on track with our numbers and to show that In this case, the association is over budget, so they've spent more than they've budgeted by $4,400. Hopefully at the end of the year, that'll be a positive number. Of course, that's the goal. But again, this number is what you see on the balance sheet as net income, so this is just your summary of how we get to that number. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, great. So next is going to be your summary receivable report. So this is the accounts receivable balance that we looked at on the balance sheet. This will show you who owes the association money. So owners that are delinquent. So we luckily only have 2 owners that are delinquent here. We also have an owner that this owner is in collections, but it also, you'll see, has a different series of account numbers. So when you see an account number for a homeowner that starts with a 7, and it's not in line with what your other account numbers are, what that can tell you is that this owner is no longer an owner, or they're in bankruptcy. If it was in bankruptcy, you would see bankruptcy mentioned here. But in this case, I would assume, and there should be some notes here on the account, that this was a foreclosure. We have a lot of personal judgments that we're still collecting on, and luckily we are collecting on them, because with the economy previously in good condition, a lot of these owners are then trying to purchase homes, and they had judgments against them and they weren't able to do so. So the associations are really collecting a lot of these personal judgments. In this case, you'll see that there is a negative here, and that means that we actually received in the current month a payment against their previously $1,800 balance. So he's working down his balance, and soon that personal judgment will be paid in full, hopefully. But that's why you see these series of numbers that are a little bit different than our regular account numbers. And you'll see mostly the notes. If it was a bankruptcy, you might see the owner listed twice. So you'll see owner listed with a 7,000 series number, and then you'll also see them with a regular account number, because we have to separate the account pre-petition to post-petition. So that's why if you see a bankruptcy and you see an owner listed twice, that's why it's most likely a Chapter 13, where they're actually making payments on their current assessments and their past assessments, depending on what the situation is that they arranged in bankruptcy. That would be updated on the Allied spreadsheet. Next is a summary of accounts payable, and again, this is on the balance sheet of what we saw that we owed a company or a vendor at the end of the month. So in this particular case, we got a landscape company invoice that came in super late. For some reason, it didn't go through the invoice process. So the invoice is really over 90 days past due, but we just got that invoice, but we are paying it, and of course we owed them at the end of July. The next page is our history of checks. So these are all of the checks that were written for the current month, and it kind of gives you a summary of who the check was written to, where it was coded, and any other details that the manager might have put as far as notes. So they might have put minor repairs, they might have put something specific. If it were for a specific unit number or something like that, then the notes would be included here. And then the breakdown of what the expense line items were as well. Next is our bank reconciliation. So this is the reconciliation of the account, kind of showing the activity of the account, what is cleared, what is not cleared. All the transactions that have cleared are going to be here on this first page. On the second page, it's going to show you any checks that are outstanding. So Stephanie, you actually had called about or emailed me about a check that was written several months ago that hasn't cleared, and certainly we can reissue those checks and put a stop payment since it hasn't cleared. And then this is just basically, hopefully the next month going to clear, and we shouldn't have very many outstanding checks or ever.
That was for Tom, the president. Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So we'll just have to place a stop payment, reissue that check. Things happen, get lost in the mail, who knows, it can happen. Next page is your bank statement. So this comes directly from Alliance Bank. It shows you the checks that have cleared. It shows you the ins, the outs, the beginning balance, ending balance. A lot of people ask why we don't see very many checks that are issued, but yet we see on the check register that a bunch of checks were issued. So Strong Room, this is a funny beast. They have different ways of actually paying a vendor, and they kind of give the vendor, especially at the beginning of the relationship, so if it's a first-time payment to a vendor, they give the vendor an opportunity to decide how they prefer to receive payment. They could just want to receive a check, the old-fashioned way, but there's so many other ways now. They can receive payment via virtual credit card. They can receive payment via PayPal. automatic deposit. There are some fees involved in some of these things that are totally on the back end. We have nothing to do with it. I don't even know what the fees are, but I've heard some of the fees can be extraordinary. Like a vendor that accepted $30,000 payment had a fee from their bank of $1,300 because they chose to receive that via some, I don't know, transfer or PayPal or something. There was some sort of a transfer fee that was charged by their bank, and Strongroom sometimes charges as well, some small fee, depending on how quickly they want to receive their payment. Again, this is a total relationship between Strongroom, also known as AvidPay, so you'll see that, AvidPay right there. These are things that happen on the back end that basically Strongroom, takes the money when you have authorized RNS erection to be paid. They take the money straight from the association the day that the board actually approves. So that final board approval, they actually take the money from the bank account, they transfer it to what is basically a general clearing account, and then that's when they reach out to the vendor and decide how that payment's going to get to that vendor. You may occasionally see that this vendor, maybe they got double paid, maybe the payment amount was wrong, and AvidPay will then come and send an email, which you would get from Sue. Sue actually gets those rejection emails from AvidPay saying, oh, this owner or this vendor hasn't accepted this payment. We've reached out to them several times. They previously wanted to be paid this way. They're saying that they don't have a payable due, so there's nothing due, receivable due from the association. So we're going to refund this back to the association. So you might see a deposit from AvidPay, and that would be basically like voiding a check. But because there's no actual check that exists, they're actually just depositing it electronically into the bank account. Sue usually asks questions if there is, why is it coming back to us? If they're not clear, then you'll get copied on that email, the manager would, saying, here's why the vendor rejected that payment. So in most cases, you're going to see these checks that reference the check number, so you can at least cross-reference it. If you went back to the check register, you could come back here and see if we looked at a check number here, you could cross-reference it to your bank statement to show, okay, well, here's that check that it was authorized, but it wasn't actually a check. So you're going to see it under debits. Then you're also going to see the auto pays. So we try to have all of the utilities, the insurance, anything we can have on auto pay. We do set it up on auto pay. So you'll see those transactions here. And then of course, if you have a monthly reserve transfer, you'll see that here. And again, insurance, those types of things. Here are all your lockbox deposits. So Paylease is going away at the end of the month. Yay, they're such a pain. But you will still see those transactions here. Most of our deposits do come through lockbox deposit. And then of course, they earned a small interest of $1.03. At the bottom of your bank statement, it does spell out exactly what interest rate you're receiving on those funds. And it could fluctuate depending on how much money you have in the account. Next is the reserve bank reconciliation, basically the same thing we just talked about, but for the reserve account. And then again, the reserve bank statement. And you'll see that reserves actually earn a little bit more interest. And again, it's based on how much money they have in the bank account. Next, you're going to have your general ledger. So this is just, again, another supporting document to everything you see on your balance sheet. It breaks it down by category. It's kind of a duplication of some of the things that you've seen throughout the report, but it also does help you identify. So if you wanted to know what was included in the expense for minor repairs or landscape contract, you can come back here and flip back here just to see exactly what was included or what was paid out of that expense. So minor repairs, we had 2 transactions here. It spells out what vendor received the payment and exactly how much was paid, the invoice number. Those types of things are broken down here, as well as PG&E. All of those things are included in your general ledger reports. Last page. So this is just a little notes that we have, and certainly we also would have a collection report if it was from Allied, because Allied prepares very lovely collection reports with details of the collection. In this case, this owner was previously with ASAP. We no longer use them. We kind of just inherited this account from when we took on the association, but it just basically lets you know that this owner is in collections with ASAP. And that's it, our financial reports. Any questions?
Yeah, do you, I didn't notice on the income and expense statement, do you have a page that just shows a snapshot month by month?
No, so we do have the ability to do so. It's not a standard report in the Collins package. And certainly on a case-by-case basis, I have had that request, so I have actually created that report. But unless the board asks for it, we've kind of gone with the policy of just if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
And
but we do have that ability.
And would you mind just going back to the balance sheet? I just wanted to look at something real quick.
Sure.
All right, operating. And just scroll down to the bottom, please. All right, that's all I needed to know. Thanks.
It balances, which it should. This number, obviously, total assets should always equal net worth and liabilities here. So yes, it balances. That's why it's called a balance sheet. Good question, though. Anything else?
Oh, I think I got it.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Have you walked through anything on Condo Manager as far as reporting factors?
I've no, not really on financial reporting. More with the individual accounts.
Okay, so when you're looking at a financial, this will be real quick. Let me just. Do we have time? Anybody on time?
Yeah, I definitely, because, and if there are issues with what homeowners are seeing from condo financials, who would we go to for that? So one of the homeowners sent me a statement that they were able to pull from Condo Manager, and it was almost illegible. It was, so I had to just create a statement for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't know who I would
be curious about that, because so the data is uploaded. Savannah actually takes care of that. And I'm sorry, I have to look at another screen. So can you guys see my Condo Manager?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So Savannah is actually the one that uploads the data, and it happens, I think it's every day. It might be every day, every other day. It's a huge upload that happens usually during lunch hour. It's not real time. It's usually delayed by maybe a day. But if you have something that looks funny, you might want to definitely bring it. You can bring it to my attention. I'm happy to work with you on it. Usually Sue works a lot on the website stuff. But yeah, if you have a funky owner's ledger, then we want to figure out what's going on, because it should be fairly real time. When you're looking at any owner's statement, it should actually show you what you're seeing.
Okay, cool. I'll send that to you.
Yeah,
afterward.
please do, because that should be pretty darn accurate. One thing that I've talked about in a couple of meetings, because it has come up, is that when we have a unit that sells, this system does not break up the accounts. So you might have like prior owner activity on an account that has a new owner. It will always say the name that the payment came in from, but you could have a combined statement with two owners on your statement. This can be an issue when you have a prior owner that was in collections or had like severe fines. But unfortunately, we can't separate the accounts. We could, but it causes a huge lockbox issue. It causes system issue. So this is just kind of, unfortunately, a downfall of this particular software. But there's other pluses and minuses. So yeah, let me just show you some financial statements so that if you needed to look real time, because again, if you're looking at my financial statements from July, you don't know what's actually happening here in August. So if you wanted to see where we were on the balance sheet for the current month, you would just go to financial statements and balance sheet. Just hit refresh. Sometimes if you haven't pulled this association up in Condo Manager, you might need to change the default to show you a little bit better of format of the balance sheet. So always check that to see if there is a different format that looks better for you. This one is Discovery Bay, which is a very financially healthy association, but also very complicated. But you'll see here that this will then give you real time, as of today, what your cash looks like. So they have $180,000 with Alliance Bank. They also have many other banks, but this actually gives you real time. Also, if you wanted to look at what the real-time today accounts receivable report looks like, and probably shouldn't have clicked on this one because it's such a huge association. It takes a minute to calculate this kind of stuff, but you can click on any of these categories. If you were curious what was included in the prepaid insurance, if you were curious what was included in your reserve expenses, you can click on any of these categories and it will give you the report to show you the details. So in this case, I just clicked on the receivable report. I always want to click on balance so that I can kind of see if you're curious who's in collections, if you're curious what any particular balance is as of today. This will give you the same accounts receivable report. It isn't, unfortunately, it doesn't give you the aging, it just gives you a summary of this particular report, but it at least does give you the summary of what's included in that balance as of today. So again, any of those categories.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So where it says allowance for doubtful account, is that bad debt? Is that just a different? Yeah.
It's a different labeling. So, some of them have different labels.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that we looked at for the financials for Point Richmond, which was, I don't remember what it was called, or did they even have
bad debt?
Yeah, bad debt. So in this case, it's called allowance for doubtful accounts. Depending on who set up the association when, I try to stay pretty consistent with the labels, but yes, it's the exact same thing. So that's what was determined at the end of the year. And this is actually a more accurate number because they do have quite a bit in accounts receivable and in collections. So yeah, that's a pretty accurate number of what we're probably going to see at the end of the year as far as bad debt. But yeah, same exact thing. And if you clicked on it, it's not going to tell you anything really because it's just a year-end entry that the CPA had us do. Another downfall for Condo Manager, which you'll get familiar with, is Condo Manager only shows you the current year activity. And if you wanted to see prior year activity, you have to go here to when you go to open your associations, click on this show previous years. You have to go all the way to the bottom. Yeah, super duper downfall of this software. There's a lot of things I like about this software. This one is not one. It is the biggest pet peeve I have. You actually have to go into the prior year. So if you wanted to see a prior year, you have to go and select that file. Usually it takes a minute versus going to say, oh, do you know you're going into a prior year? Yes, I do. Okay, sometimes it has to like totally catch up with it because as the system does changes within the system, it has to then upload it for a prior year once you're opening a prior year. But yeah, then you could actually go into a balance sheet, show the prior year, look at all the transactions. It's only going to show you that year, only 2019. It's not going to show you any current activity. If you needed to look at an owner's ledger, that you're like, well, why do they have a beginning balance as of January 1st of $10,000? Well, unfortunately, to see that history, you're going to have to go to the prior year. Sometimes when Danielle sends a collection or account to collections and they have a running balance for like 10 years, guess what? She has to go to every single year to download every single ledger. It's totally crazy. Mm-hmm. But pluses and minuses of the system.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to look at your current income and expense report, so the same thing we're looking at within the financials. I don't like this revenue and expense report. It's just a summary. It doesn't give you your budget at all. I like the comparative revenue and expense statement. This will actually give you current month activity if you hit refresh. And then, of course, if you wanted to go through and say, oh, well, why am I over budget on my office expense by $413? You can actually click on that expense line item. It will only show you for the current month, but if you hit this button year, here you go, all your transactions. It just tells you the invoices that you've had, which in this case, there's a huge invoice in June. Most likely, it's the budget packet that went out. But you can always cross-reference this by going to Strong Room, looking up the invoice, all that good stuff. But yeah, you'll see all the current activity here for the month, the year, same report you saw within the financials.
And then that prints out fairly flawlessly, I'm assuming, or I discovered upon trying to save a PDF statement, and I literally was like, am I insane? Because I kept saving it to the desktop. And finally, I happened to be on the phone with Paul, and I was like, I'm losing my mind. He's like, it's saving to a different desktop. So I was like,
tricky. Yeah. So that goes for any owner statement you're trying to download, anything. Yep. So in order to get it off, I'm just going to show you real quick, although it sounds like you figured it out, Stephanie, which is totally insane. But again, we are all working on remote desktops. So the desktop that you see here is not your desktop.
Nope.
So you'd have to export to PDF. And see, I have a lot of activity here because I don't clear it out, but it's not my desktop, so I don't care.
Right.
But I just save it here to the desktop, and I just save it. It's going to save the report. Do you want to see it? No, I'm already looking at it. And then I have to do it again. So another crazy thing with this. And so there I go. So I just sorted it by date so that it just brings up my most recent report that I just got. Then I have to go and copy or cut, either way, copy it, cancel this, bring it to my desktop, and actually put it on my desktop. That's the only way to get a report, unless you can email it to yourself too. So that's the other thing you can do. You can email it to yourself. But even if you wanted to put it into Word, if you wanted to put it in Excel, again, you're not saving it to your desktop. This is a remote desktop.
Actually, I did figure out another way. I did that. Your way is way better. What I did was just save it to the to the X drive under Marina Bay.
Yeah, it was, that's a possibility too.
But yours is better in that just copying it and putting it onto your desktop. Okay.
So where is it actually saving it before you do that? Where on the remote desktop?
This is in Canada. It's actually in Canada. It is actually in Canada at the big, huge server house of Condo Manager, which is where this program was first initially built. They now do have a U.S. office, but our original package that we purchased was from the Canada office. So our technical support is also through Canada, which is very difficult to understand.
Those hosers.
Yeah. So that's the other fun part is we're also on time differences, obviously. So between the language barrier and everything else, luckily the system, it's pretty good as far as not having too many issues. When I first started, certainly we had speed issues, but now it's definitely improved a lot. But that's the thing is you're actually saving this on this desktop in Canada that who knows who's maintaining it. Like I have documents that I've downloaded here from like 2017 that are still on that desktop. And in order to clear those, which I don't even care who wants to clear that stuff, in order to clear those, I have to individually delete the files. It won't let you do a capture all like, shift, select all these files, delete. No, it doesn't allow you to do that. You have to do it individually. So I just left it, excuse me. I just leave all those files there. I don't ever have to refer back to them because now they're somewhere on my OneDrive or somewhere saved appropriately. But yeah, it's in the cloud basically.
Thank you.
Canada.
Thank you for making that.
Oh, that's the other fun part. Okay, so just a few other things, I guess, would be your general ledger report. This is super helpful when you're doing your budget preparation. And this is going to be under your reports and your other accounting reports. If you wanted to run a general ledger for the entire year, that at least will give you a snapshot of every transaction. You could just go in here, and in this case, their year started in June, running it through the current year, and just hit refresh. And this will give you a breakdown of all of your categories so that when you're looking at your budget worksheet that you're working on, you can refer back and kind of look at, well, where do we have these big numbers from? Of course, you know, the bank account information isn't totally helpful for any of that, but going through all these expense line items and looking through the details of what was in that total, that definitely does help. So that's a useful report when you're doing your budgets. And then, of course, the managers are responsible for inputting their own budgets within the system, which is here under budgets. And you would see a prior year here and a current year here. And hopefully you've already worked with Christian. I think she's the one responsible for budgets. But I'm always available if you have any questions about that too.
So when we do our budget, I should not even worry about that right now, but who's going to be doing who am I working with for budgets? Christian?
I believe it's Christian that handles the budgets. Yeah, I'll have to look at the management or the new hire spreadsheets to see who is actually responsible for that. But yeah, let me just look real quick. Has anybody, Tammy or Dean, have you worked with anybody on budgets yet?
Yeah, let me see who it was though. I've
Yep, it
worked
is
with,
Christian.
yeah, I must have
Yeah,
been her.
so Christian generally does a lot of the condo manager training, but she is also responsible for budgets. But again, she is for new hire training. So if you haven't already worked with her, then definitely work with her, or even if you need a refresher, she's super knowledgeable on that.
Okay. Yeah, I did a training with her for the condo manager, but not budget. So
definitely reach out to her and schedule some time. I know you got a little bit of time before you have to work on that again, but yeah, catch her after the new year so that you can start working on your budget.
yeah.
Cool. One other thing I did want to point out, so like when we looked at the receivable report and there was that owner that was a other receivable or what was a different account number sequence that was a foreclosure owner. So all of our current owners are listed under current owner, under the owners, but remember that account number, that funky one that started with a 7?
Yes.
You can find the details of that owner under receivable other than owners. So then that will give you their statement just as you would see for the owners. That will give you that information just as it was an owner, but because they're no longer an owner or because they're in bankruptcy, we totally separate them out from the current owners. But that's where you can find that information when you're looking for it. Cool. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Absolutely, anytime. So I hope this was helpful, but certainly give me a call if you ever need anything, or shoot me an email. Happy to work with you on it.
Great. Thanks so much.
Super, super helpful. Great
Absolutely.
job.
Anytime at all.
All right. Have a great vacation.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Are we not meeting afterwards? You don't have time? You want to do it when you get back?
Yes, if that's possible. Is that okay?
Of course it is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yes,
Let's
absolutely.
definitely set up some time when I get back.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank
Lonnie,
you.
did you want to meet with me for like 5 minutes or?
Yes.